Communication. Our objectives for today are to distinguish the 5 types of teams. We'll also identify team characteristics and the stages of team development. We'll evaluate team cohesiveness, norms, and the concept of groupthink. We'll describe team conflict, and we'll explain the importance of effective communication as well as its basic forms. Finally, we'll examine a team charter and its elements. So why does teamwork and communications matter? You're hired as an individual, you're excited to work at a firm, and suddenly you find out you're going to be working with other people. In reality, in most jobs, you're generally not going to get to work just you and never interact with anyone. Even if you have a more virtual type of job where you're working remotely, you still have to communicate in some form, even if it's over email. You'll find that that means you're interacting often with others, and many businesses have found that teams can actually produce better, more creative results. So you'll find that many firms are actually having people work together in the hopes that those teams will have the type of synergy to complement each other's strengths and hopefully build a better end result. That means teamwork leads to be effective must have communication. And that's a very critical role on a team. You'll find that the majority of recruiters, the most important skill they're looking for is communication. You'll discover that even a team of star players will be doomed if they can't communicate in an effective manner. So with teamwork, we need to discuss communication today. So let's start by discussing the 5 types of teams. As I mentioned previously, a majority of United States firms currently use work teams. So what's the difference between a team and a group? A team is a group of employees who are generally committed to and mutually responsible for a common purpose, approach, and a set of performance goals. A group works more independently. They meet primarily just to share information. Okay, so there might be a group of moms. Each person in that group has a kid, and they're what we call a mom's group. It doesn't mean that they're working toward a goal together. They just have this general thing in common, and so they're helping each other and things like that, but they're more like a group. They don't have an outcome they're working on together that they're mutually responsible for. To be a team, that means you really need this level of interdependence. A team means that someone letting you down on the team means you're going to fail. That means you're dependent on them in some way. You have to be working on something together and be responsible for that outcome together. Now, the hope is that in working together rather than apart, you'll have a better result. Okay, you'll have this synergy through great communication that as a team, you're able to produce more than each of your individual parts. You might think of a team, a good example would be any sports team. They're working together to win. Where again, a group, it could be a group of fans watching the game. They're not going to be working on, anything necessarily together to improve the game's performance. They're just all fans of that specific team. So let's look at the 5 types of teams you'll generally see in the business field. The first you'll see is what we call self-managed team. These are teams that are empowered to decide how to complete tasks on their own. Your boss will say, you need to complete this report by Friday. And then the team decides how they want to delegate who's doing what, which parts of the report, and by when. Now, a cross-functional team is a team made of members from different parts of a firm. Okay, generally, this can help because you're getting different perspectives and insights in a more diverse group. So a great example of this in a cross-functional team, I'm working now on a research project. That project includes people from the marketing part of the organization, so they can help make sure that we're really thinking of the sales side of business. It also includes some of the customers, which are faculty and students. Okay, and then it also includes someone who has really great research expertise. By using all these different functions, the marketing piece, the operations piece, the subject matter piece, we're coming together as a cross-functional team to hopefully produce a better end result as we're unifying all these competing perspectives and different kind of types of jobs. Now, a virtual team is a group of geographically dispersed coworkers. As I was describing in my last example, our team's actually spread out across the United States. As you know, I'm located here in Maryland. Another member of the team is working from North Carolina. We have someone working from Massachusetts. And then we have others working close by, but in Virginia. So we work virtually. When we need to meet, we do a conference call or a video call, and we generally will send documents electronically that we can then see on the screen together and work on together electronically. We rarely will meet in person. Now, work groups do daily work together. So work teams, here we're coming together, working toward a common purpose. Hey, we're a work team. Any type of team you see on the job. Now, problem-solving teams are really the most popular with companies because they include knowledge workers who gather to solve a problem and then disband. A great example of a problem-solving team, when I worked for the United States Department of Education, they were working on trying to allow more workers to work from home. They called this telework. You might call it remote work. And so some of the issues they were going through was that management was uncomfortable with allowing its employees to work from home. They were concerned about the fact that they could not see them, and they were worried about the employees really not doing a lot of work if they were at a home office rather than coming to the office. So a working team was put together doing tasks in the workplace. We were put together on site to solve this problem. Okay, and that was something that we did actually build a team charter for, which you'll learn about more later in this module. So keep in mind, while there are 5 different types of teams noted on the screen, they can overlap. As I mentioned in my problem-solving team example, we were also a work team. In the research project that I'm working on, we're a virtual team, we're a cross-functional team, and we are also self-managed. We're hoping to produce an article for publication, but by a certain point, but there's not a lot of guidance about when we need to do certain parts, who's doing what parts, so our team's working on our strategy for that. So let's look at some of the team characteristics and some of the stages of team development. Now, size on a team can range widely, but generally groups of 4 to 5 members are going to be the most productive. So you'll find that in your classes, you'll often be broken down into this group size. As you expand the number of people on a team, it can be harder to get people together, to actually communicate with each other and listen to everyone on the team. And so you really want to be mindful of the number of people on the team itself. Team diversity is another big aspect of teams. This includes variances or differences not only in things like race, gender, national origin, but also things like ability, experience, how many years you might be on the job, put different personality types, or any other factor on a team. The hope is by bringing these people of different backgrounds, different experience, different expertise together, they can share that experience, those different perspectives, those different strengths, and hopefully complement each other in a way that makes the team more effective. Now, team level is the average ability, experience, and personality, or any other factor on a team. So we're looking at those levels of ability. You may have a situation where you have someone with ample experience, someone who's been with the firm for 20 years, working together with someone newer who can bring a new kind of fresh insight, but might be lacking some of the knowledge about the business itself. Now, effective teams. Here are some of the characteristics you will find in effective teams. There's going to be a clear, what we call unity of purpose. The objectives meaningful to each member. Okay, everybody's excited about working toward this common goal, and because of that motivation towards getting that outcome done together, you'll hopefully have good communication and good work ethic. The group can be self-conscious about its own operations, discussing how the group will function to be more effective. Okay, it's important to talk about how you plan to do the work. Okay, having that conversation can avoid conflicts. The group should have clear and demanding performance goals. Okay, that's where that idea of SMART goals comes in that we talked about earlier in the course. If the goals are specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound, it's more likely people will be motivated and will be aware of how to complete them and able to track their progress. The atmosphere tends to be more informal, comfortable, and relaxed in effective teams. A lot of discussion in which virtually everyone participates is a big part of an effective team. That's where that communication piece comes in. In order to really have that synergy in a team, to really get that kind of extra piece that's so valuable in bringing people together, you need to make sure everyone's communicating. If 4 people are sharing their ideas and the 5th person doesn't get a chance to do so, they're really not being a productive member of that team, and you're missing out on that 5th person's advice and any ideas they might have. This means that people have to feel free to express their feelings and ideas. If they don't feel like they can share that information, again, we have a communication issue that can hurt productivity. There's also disagreement. We'll talk a little bit more about conflict in a moment. This is a good thing. It's good to disagree about how to move forward. That way you can talk about the different strategies that are out there, the pros and cons of each, and make a good choice to move forward with really the most effective strategy. If instead Joe Schmo says, this is the way to move forward, and the other 4 members of the team say, great, we all agree with Joe, you might just be following what Joe said just because Joe said it and not because it's the best method forward. Most decisions are made at a point when there's general agreement. It's helpful to make a decision where everyone's on board. Sometimes you won't be able to do that. If there's 4 or 5 people on the team, 4 out of 5 might say, yep, we want to move forward. And that 5th person could say, no, I don't like this. Ultimately, though, you have to choose a path forward that you can live with. So it's really important in the decision-making process to determine what that process will be. Will it be a majority vote? Do you need to be unanimous? Does everyone need to agree how to move forward before you do? What happens if there's an even amount of people on the team and there's 2 and 2 votes, one way and the other? You really need to talk through that process. And again, that's where that team charter we'll talk about today comes into play. Another big part of being a productive team is that each individual should carry his or her own weight. There's actually a theory called social loafing, where people feel that they can actually not do a lot of work on a team because they're less accountable. In a way, they can actually hide the amount of work they're doing because the team's responsible as a whole. And so you'll notice that a lot of team projects and classes and on the jobs, there'll usually be a team accountability mechanism as well as an individual mechanism for accountability to make sure each person is holding their own weight and not kind of hiding, amongst the team and their efforts and really slacking off. Another part of an effective team is that criticism is frequent, frank, and relatively comfortable. It's done in a respectful manner. Again, questioning how you're doing things and why you're doing things to make sure that you're on track and moving forward in the right way, not just because someone said it, but because it's the best methodology. The leadership of the group may often switch from time to time as well, and that's okay too. It's good to have a leader who can really help drive the team forward and motivate them toward that goal and help the team listen to each other, communicate, and overall be more effective. Now, the stages of team development you can see on the screen. I'm just going to move this down just a little bit here so you can see it a little better. These you'll often see in business textbooks, and they talk through generally what you'll go through in any team you're working on. In the very first stage of team development, you'll see the forming stage. When you start on a team, there'll be little agreement. Sometimes the purpose of the team can be unclear, and you're looking for that guidance and direction. You're coming together. This is when you're introducing yourselves, saying each other's names, looking at what the project requires, learning more about it. As you move forward into the next stage of team development, you'll see this is the storming stage. Here there'll often be conflict. Again, we'll talk more about conflict. Remember, this is not necessarily a bad thing. In the storming stage, that conflict simply could be disagreement. There are 5 different choices and you're disagreeing about which one might be the right choice. And that'll help you to analyze those 5 choices more critically and ultimately, hopefully, choose the best choice. There's also going to be more increased clarity on the purpose of the group. There may be some power struggles, who's going to be the leader. I could say I'm the leader, and then turns out that you actually are acting as the leader, motivating the group, keeping them organized and communicating with everybody. And there can be some struggle there. You also might need some coaching, how to move forward, samples, and guidance about that. As you move past that storming phase, you'll get into the 3rd stage of team development, which is known as norming. Here, there'll be a lot more agreement and consensus about how to move forward. You'll start to have more clearly defined roles as well and be more accountable and have some responsibility. You start to facilitate the process. In the performing stage, there's clear vision and purpose. You're focusing on goal achievement. You're delegating tasks. People are getting the work done. Ultimately, this will lead to the final phase of team development, which is adjourning. Here the task is complete. You feel good about what you've achieved. People get recognition, and you should be done with your teamwork. In general, most teams will go through these stages in different time frames, but you should see each of them on any team project that you could be working on. We'll now talk more about some important team concepts: team cohesiveness, team norms, and this idea of groupthink. Now, team cohesiveness is the extent to which team members feel attracted to the team and really motivated to remain part of it. That's an important way to help the team be more productive, more effective, and hopefully get to that performing stage more quickly. So when do you think cohesiveness increases? Some examples are when you're having the opportunity to talk to one another. Okay, there can be ways to help people improve their cohesiveness by letting them get to know each other on a more personal level, becoming more friendly. And some good best practices for that you can find in the leadership field in many different forms. An example I'll give to you. When I was a manager for AT&T, one of the things I did to help improve my team cohesiveness, the employees working for me, was to bring them out for a dinner each month to celebrate our accomplishments. That allowed them a chance off the job to connect with one another on a more personal level, without all the work going on, without all the craziness of the store, and hopefully to feel then more connected to each other. Then you have people being nicer to each other, helping each other, because they're going, this is my friend who I want to help and really, move the team as a whole forward. Okay, not feeling kind of disconnected and not wanting to be there and really not doing their role well on the job. So you can think of some other ways to help build team cohesiveness. Again, communication is going to be at the heart of that, and we'll talk more about that today. Team norms are interesting. They're the informal standards of conduct that are shared by team members and guide their behavior. It's not necessarily something in writing. It's just something that develops. For example, a team norm might be that you wear jeans on Fridays. Okay, no one wrote down that it's casual day on Fridays, but that is something that you're doing on the job. It could be, hey, we set up a meeting for noon and everyone knows it's really going to start at 12:10, or it's really going to start, 11:45, everyone should be there. Again, that's not something you'll see in writing, but you'll see it develop over time. The ways in which you conduct your business operations. So a team norm might be that everyone starts checking in at a certain time and via a tool like GroupMe, which is a great app to communicate with team members, or via email or a quick phone call. It might be that there's a weekly check-in going on where everyone's sending out the progress of the group. And again, team norms are things that are going to develop within the group as the group moves forward or the team moves forward that guides the team's behavior but may not be in writing. You'll see a joke on the screen here. It says, I don't care how young it makes you feel, you work here, you carry a briefcase. You'll see the gentleman's wearing a backpack. Again, you often won't see a lot of requirements about what you should be wearing to work in writing. When I worked for Department of Education, you had to dress professionally. You couldn't wear jeans to work, but you still had to wear business casual. You didn't necessarily have to wear a suit. Whereas with Deloitte Consulting, it was expected that you wear a suit every single day. Again, I didn't see that in the employee handbook. No one said that, but you noticed that in terms of the employees around you. It was a norm that developed. Now, a really big concept you need to be familiar with in terms of teams is this idea of groupthink. It's the practice of thinking or making decisions as a group in a way that really discourages creativity or individual responsibility. This is really counterintuitive to what you want in that synergy from a group. Okay, and working with others and being in a team, you can't really move forward in a way where it's worth it to have been on a team if you're experiencing groupthink. So let's look at some of the symptoms of groupthink. Here you'll see things like a direct pressure on dissenters. Members are under pressure not to express arguments against any of the group's views. So 4 people might be saying this is what we think, and the 5th person is really the one with the right information, but they feel so much pressure from others to just conform with the other 4 that they agree to move forward in a way that's really not productive. That's an element of self-censorship as well. Here there can be doubts and deviations from the perceived group consensus that are really not expressed. Again, you're feeling that peer pressure and you're not speaking out. Okay, to avoid this, it's really important that you have a devil's advocate. Okay, that's someone who's simply saying, yes, this seems like the right way forward, but let's think about this alternative. Even if it doesn't seem practical, could this also be a solution? Questioning what's going on to make sure it's the right way forward. There also can be this stereotype view of outgroups. Negative views of enemies make effective responses to conflict seem unnecessary. There's an illusion of invulnerability. It creates excessive optimism and encourages taking extreme risks. The group saying, hey, we're amazing, we know we're amazing, and they're not questioning anything they're doing. And it's important to know that you do not know in some circumstances and to make sure that you're looking into information critically with logical based reasoning to make a decision on facts, okay, and good critical thinking, instead of just on, hey, this is what the group's doing and we're amazing and everything we do is amazing, and not taking a step back and just making sure it's the right way forward. So here's some of the remedies you'll see on the screen. We talked about the devil's advocate, the critical evaluator of each team member. The leader should also avoid stating their own preferences and expectations at the outset. If you as a leader say what you're thinking, people may feel pressured to kind of align with the leadership rather than stating their own opinions. So by allowing everyone else the chance to share their opinion before stating your own, you can be a more productive leader for the group. Each member of the group should routinely discuss the group's deliberations with a trusted associate and report back to the group on their reactions. So they're taking the information the group came up with and checking in with someone who's outside of the group to get a more objective view of it, just to make sure you're not getting this obsessive optimism and not really checking to making sure the group's still on the right track. One or more experts should also be invited to each meeting on a staggered basis. They should be encouraged to challenge the views of the members. Again, making sure we're not just agreeing to something or moving forward based on peer pressure, but on the right reasons. At least one articulate and knowledgeable member should be given the role of that devil's advocate. Okay, no question to question assumptions and plans of the group. And the leader should make sure that a sizable block of time is set aside to survey warning signals from rivals. Leaders and group construct alternative scenarios of rivals' intentions. So you'll see on the screen here it says, we need more dissenting opinions. And then everyone on the team saying, we agree 100%, absolutely, sir. This is what we want to avoid with groupthink. Don't want people to just peer pressure, everyone's agreeing just to be agreeable and not really because it's the right decision to move forward. Again, you're missing out then on that synergy and on some of the benefits of being a team. Before we jump forward, I'm just going to click on the video on the screen here. This is a great example of groupthink. There have been many in the past that you'll hear about in your classes. A groupthink in this film is the 12 Angry Men. You'll see a group of men, there's 12 men on this jury, and they're working together to make a decision on whether or not this person committed murder. Okay. In making that decision, you'll see throughout the film, if you're interested, again, it's called 12 Angry Men, a lot of the concepts of groupthink and some of the symptoms we discussed as well as the remedies going on. This quick clip will help us illustrate some of what we've talked about in terms of groupthink. If you're interested, you can watch the rest of the film.
Now, are you trying to tell me that this knife really fell through a hole in the boy's pocket? Someone picked it up off the street, went to the boy's house, and stabbed his father with it just to test its sharpness?
No, I'm just saying it's possible the boy lost his knife, and if somebody else stabbed his father with a similar knife, it's just possible.
Take a look at this knife. It's a very unusual knife. I've never seen one like it. Neither had the storekeeper who sold it to the boy. Aren't you asking us to accept a pretty incredible coincidence?
I'm just saying a coincidence is possible.
And I say it's not possible.
What did that...
So you'll see in that video clip, the whole group is pressuring this one individual. We have 12 men saying, hey, 11 men saying, hey, to the 12th, this cannot be possible. There's only one of these knives. It's so custom made and it's so unique. And yet there was the 12th member with the exact same knife in their pocket. And so that just illustrates to you the importance of avoiding that type of peer pressure, having that devil's advocate, asking those questions. Here, the outcome is whether or not someone actually committed murder. And so that person, making the wrong choice, saying they're guilty, without really questioning it, could cause them a life sentence in jail or even to lose their life if they face the death penalty. And so it's a really important decision they're making. And so it's really important to evaluate all the information, all the facts, and make sure you're 100% certain on how you're moving forward by looking at all the different alternatives and making sure you are able to respectfully address any dissenters' opinions without that peer pressure that can lead to groupthink. We're going to move forward now to talk about this idea of team conflict. We've mentioned this a couple times throughout our discussion today. Team conflict is when one person or group's needs don't match those of another, and attempts may be made to block the opposing side's intentions or goals. When you think about conflict, you probably think about an argument you've had with a significant other, a family member, a friend. It doesn't make you feel good. It's usually a really just awful feeling, and it can be really, really, really disconcerting, and it's not a fun place to be, and it's certainly not productive. Now, conflict can be a good thing, though, when it's cognitive conflict. This means you're focusing on problem-related differences of opinion. In a business setting, this just might be a difference in how to move forward. Do we make a PowerPoint with 10 slides or 8 slides? It's not personal. And that's something that sometimes gets lost in a professional setting. I've seen this happen, and it was something that surprised me. Working in one of my jobs, I saw this person getting really angry because they created this beautiful PowerPoint presentation and they had this whole strategy and how the company could move forward in a new way. And everybody else on the team said, no, we're not interested. And they felt like it was because of them personally, that the people on the team just did not like them. But really, the team just didn't feel like the strategy was the best method forward. Now, that cognitive conflict, if you don't take it personally and turn it into affective conflict we're about to see, cognitive conflict will be a good thing. Now, here you're disagreeing on how to move forward, so you're looking at all the different alternatives and really evaluating the best one. Not just choosing one because you like Joe Schmo, you're choosing that method because it's the best method forward. Affective conflict is a little different. This refers to that emotional reaction that can occur when disagreements become personal rather than professional. So you want to be careful. If someone doesn't like your idea on the job or they're giving you feedback about it, doesn't mean they don't like you. It simply means that they might think, hey, there's a better way to move this forward, and you should be interested in that. Even if you disagree with that one person, if one person feels that way, a customer could feel that way, another employee could feel that way. So it's worth giving some attention. It can still be productive, and you could find a better method forward if it remains cognitive. If you have this type of personal reaction I described in my example, it becomes affective conflict, and it really won't be productive to help you have a good workplace situation. As we talk about teamwork, you've noticed communication as a theme of how to remain productive and get that synergy from a team. So what is communication? Communication is known as a meaningful exchange of information through messages. Now you'll see here on the screen some of the different ways that we communicate. Now immediately when I said communication, many of you probably thought of what we think of as verbal communication. Okay, this can be oral communication, like I'm speaking now and you're listening to me. It can also be in writing, okay, writing or reading information. Now, what often is not immediately thought of, but is a big part of communication, is nonverbal communication. Your facial expressions, your gestures, your body language, your proximity, touching, any personal appearance, or even silence can send a message. So an example I like to give. When I worked for the United States Department of Education, the office was freezing. So I'd go to these meetings that were really exciting to be a part of. Really, it was a privilege to get to be there. And yet I was in my seat with my arms like this, kind of hunched back because I was really cold. And unfortunately, if you look at nonverbal communication, while I was just cold and hugging myself and trying to keep myself warm, it could indicate to others that I was disinterested or really not wanting to be there. Another example of that, which would never happen in my class, but that you might see, if a student is like this, with their head on the desk, and they're just kind of like, oh, or going like this, kind of falling asleep and waking up. Do you think that indicates they're interested in the material, that they're interested in being there? It might not seem that way, and it could be as simple as they worked all night and they're exhausted, but it gives off a certain message to the people around them. So you want to be careful not just about what you're doing, what you're saying, but also what you're doing. Okay, it's important to smile, make good eye contact, hold your shoulders back, dress professionally, speak respectfully. All these types of things can help make sure you're communicating in a professional way, rather than making someone think that you're disinterested in the meeting or not wanting to be there. Okay? So why is communication so important? Managers spend 80% of their time in direct communication with others, other employees, other customers. So company recruiters actually rate effective communication as the most important skill they're looking for in hiring new college graduates. That means communication should be very important for you. Many of you are here seeking a degree to seek a career opportunity of interest to you. And no matter what field you're going into, communication is going to be a big part of that to help create mutual understanding. And so when you're doing something like creating a resume, you're creating verbal communication in writing. Okay, and that's their first way to see how you communicate. So you need to have a strong resume, which is why that's a big part of our course. Now, if you're invited to an interview, they're looking at how you communicate orally, and not just how you're talking, but also how you're listening, the questions that you're asking, and then those nonverbal communication pieces that we talked about. How you're holding yourself in your chair, a good handshake, eye contact, being respectful. So that's a really big part of being a good employee, a good candidate for a job position, as well as being an effective team member. I like to show the example on the screen. You'll see a bunch of surgeons standing around a table, and it says, "And that is why we lift on 3. Clearly the patient has fallen off the table. While someone said, "Okay, lift on 3, they might have thought it was lift on 1, 2, 3, then lift. It could have been 3, 2, 1. They got confused about the countdown. They didn't do it together, and we have a patient on the floor as a result. Another good example, imagine that Spanish is your first language, and you walk in to see a doctor because you're feeling really ill. Your stomach hurts, your head's aching, your mouth is really dry, your back's hurting, you're having severe pains in your legs, and you want to describe all these symptoms to the doctor. Unfortunately, while you're fluent in Spanish, they only speak English. Are you going to be able to communicate in a manner where they can really understand what's going on? Are they going to be able to diagnose you in a helpful way? If they just threw medication at you, it could be the wrong thing. So it's important that you can communicate and understand each other to have a meaningful exchange of information for communication. Now, as a big part of that in the workplace, there's actually a concept called the grapevine. And you'll see on the screen, it kind of just looks like gossiping. That's exactly what it is. It's an internal channel that passes information from unofficial sources. This might have happened in your high schools. You have rumors passing around about people, and you might have thought you outgrew that, but this continues in the workplace. It's valuable to a manager or supervisor because they can find out real information. You might not walk into your boss's office and say, "I hate this new idea, this new thing you've implemented, it's terrible." But you could feel comfortable sharing that with a colleague over coffee, in the break room. So that grapevine can be a really good resource for a manager to get real information about how employees are feeling about new initiatives or even new ideas for the business. A good illustration of communication issues is the game telephone. Here, one person's given a line, and they'll whisper that same line to the person next to them continuously until you finally get to the last person in the game. What generally happens is a simple statement like, "Everyone in this class will receive an A," turns into something like, "To get an A in this class, everyone needs to go to the zoo." And it seems crazy, but sometimes you have outside noise making it hard to hear when one person's whispering to the next. You have people forgetting the message. Generally, if you don't write something down, a lot of people will forget what it is, even if it's a quick statement. And so as you play this game, what started as the original message will change significantly by the last person. It's a great example of how communication is so important to make sure the right message is communicated in a business setting. Now, our last topic for today, to help with all of these pieces in teamwork and communication, is what's known as a team charter. It's a written document that defines a team's mission, so the heart of the team, its priorities, their scope of operation, some of the limits there, how they'll operate, roles on the team, who's doing what, the objectives of the team, what they hope to obtain, the timeline, which is a big part of it. I like to call it a project plan. Okay, making a plan for who's doing what, when, and consequences. When you come together and you're all saying, we're going to do this group project for our class, and we're all going to do our part, and we're all going to do high quality work, and then it comes down to it, and some people are slacking, procrastinating, their work is not high quality. If you agree to the consequences for that in advance, it can be a lot easier to implement them. So you'll notice that there's a handout of the team charter accessible in our learning module to see an outline of what this can look like. Now, this isn't something you'll just see in your textbook. Now, as I mentioned on that working team I worked with Department of Education, we had a very clearly defined team charter to start out our planning and our meetings. This is often the case if you're working in a good team, is that you will address these elements to make sure you're communicating who's doing what clearly, what the schedule is, and ultimately then you should have a better outcome. So some of the elements you may see in a team charter are things like the purpose of the team. There could be some background. There can also be a scope, really what you'll be focusing on. At that Department of Education team I was working on, we were focusing primarily on manager supervision of people working remotely. Now, it could have expanded beyond that to how can we improve telework, what software might be needed, who should be allowed to do it. And really, by giving that scope, we were able to focus the group's attention to that specific area. The team composition is also a big part of this, so who's on the team and looking at who has what strengths. By having a quick conversation about what your own strengths are, some weak areas for you, you might find someone else on the team who has that as a strength, and then who's really best to assign to do what. You'll also see membership roles are important to identify. Who's going to serve as the leader? Is there someone who's going to take notes? That sort of thing. Team operations are also important, talking through how you plan to do the project, agreeing on how you're going to perform. If you have something due, that it'll be submitted and how it'll be submitted. Looking at the schedules and what we call milestones. This is the project planning piece that should take up the most time in working on your team charter. Saying, here's our 5 members. Each person's doing this by then. If they don't do that, we have a contingency plan, which is what we will do if they fail to meet the requirement. For example, maybe in a class, it would be that you contact the professor 24 hours after the team member misses the internal deadline. And having that signature at the end, it's showing you all agree to it ahead of time. So let's say you're on a group project in class, you're in the project with me, and I don't submit what you had as my part on the group. So then you reach out and you're like, hey, Hannah didn't do her part of the project. What's up with this? And you're reaching out and I'm not responding. If I agreed in advance that within 24 hours you could call the instructor and let them know I failed to do my part, then if I come back to you and say, hey, why'd you tell on me? Why'd you snitch to the teacher? I was gonna do it and that was really bad. You can say, I'm sorry, but we all agreed in advance that within 24 hours we were going to contact the professor. We're accountable as a team, and you failing to do your part hurts my grade on the team project as well as your team members. It's just not fair to us. And you agreed that was the case ahead of time when we got this started. It was kind of unfair for you to put us in that position, actually. So it can help lead to a more productive conversation to talk about what could go wrong, even if you're optimistic that it won't. Just what could go on in the worst case scenario and how you'll deal with those problems in advance of them occurring. We've seen a lot of information today about teamwork, which is a vital part of the United States business field today. Many businesses are operating in teams, and communication is a critical part of that teamwork, as well as a major skill that recruiters are looking for because of that. So please look at some of the team elements that we talked about today, as well as some of the communication pieces. And I encourage you to hold on to that team charter and to always use one when you're working on a team to help address some of the areas of concern we discussed today and ultimately lead to that synergy that can be so useful in bringing people together who are mutually responsible for a task and achieving a good outcome as part of a team. Thank you.